In 1993, a 175-pound fighter walked into a tournament with no weight classes and no time limit, and submitted three bigger opponents in one night using a technique almost nobody in the crowd recognized. His name was Royce Gracie, and that single night in the first UFC broke almost everything people assumed about how a real fight actually works. Here are 10 more MMA myths that are just as wrong. Myth 1. Tapping out means you lost and it's embarrassing. Casual viewers see a fighter tap the mat or their opponent's body and read it as total defeat. But tapping is a rule built specifically to end a fight before permanent damage happens. A fighter caught in an armbar or a choke isn't giving up on the sport. They're making the smart call between a temporary loss and a torn ligament or a blackout. Some of the sport's most respected competitors have tapped out early in their careers and gone on to become champions, because recognizing you're caught is itself a skill. The stigma comes almost entirely from people unfamiliar with grappling, where submission is a built-in escape valve, not a personality flaw. Myth 2. The cage was designed to make fights look more brutal. The 8-sided octagon looks intentionally intimidating, like it was engineered to make the whole sport feel more savage than boxing. In reality, the shape exists for the opposite reason. No corners means no spot where a fighter can get trapped and take unnecessary damage, and the solid fence keeps fighters from tumbling out the way boxers occasionally fall through. The name itself traces back to a 1980 Chuck Norris movie called The Octagon, which is literally where the original production designer got the idea. What looks like a marketing choice built for spectacle was actually a safety decision first. Myth 3. MMA has no holds barred was the original marketing pitch for early UFC events, and the reputation stuck even after the sport changed completely. Modern MMA runs under the unified rules of mixed martial arts, which explicitly ban spine, eye gouging, groin strikes, strikes to the back of the head, and a long list of other actions, with a referee empowered to stop the fight immediately for a violation. Compare that to pancration in the ancient Olympics, which banned biting and eye gouging, but still allowed almost everything else. And modern MMA actually looks more restrained by comparison. The anything goes image is a leftover from a marketing campaign, not a description of the current sport. Myth 4. Going to the ground means you're losing. This one comes straight from a boxing and street fighting mindset, where getting taken down looks like the fight is over. Royce Gracie built his entire UFC 1 run by pulling much larger opponents into his guard and finishing them with joint locks and chokes from positions that looked to an untrained eye like he was in serious trouble. Grappling exchanges on the ground are often where a smaller or technically superior fighter has the most control. Not the assumption that down equals losing is exactly the gap Gracie exploited to change the sport permanently. Myth 5. The bigger fighter always wins. Before weight classes existed in early MMA, this assumption got tested constantly, and it broke almost every time a technical grappler met an untrained bigger opponent. That's part of why the sport eventually adopted strict weight classes in the first place, because size does matter enormously when skill level is roughly equal. But the myth assumes size wins by default regardless of skill, and the entire first era of the UFC exists as a rebuttal to that idea. Technique, not tonnage, was the actual selling point that built the sport. Myth 6. Traditional martial arts don't work in MMA for years. Grappling dominance made it fashionable to write off striking styles like karate and taekwondo as decorative. Lyoto Machida built an entire UFC light heavyweight title reign around old-school karate footwork and timing that opponents couldn't figure out how to close in on. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has spent his career landing spinning kicks and karate combinations that look like they belong in a demonstration, not a cage. Judo throws, wrestling, and boxing combinations are all traditional disciplines wearing an MMA label. So the real distinction was never traditional versus modern. It was always which skills got cross-trained together. Myth 7. You can throw full power kicks without conditioning your body first. New fighters often assume kicking hard is purely a matter of technique and flexibility, but the shin itself has to be physically conditioned through repeated deliberate impact training, or it's genuinely at risk of fracturing on a hard target like an elbow or a shin check. Muay Thai gyms build entire training blocks around this. Striking pads and heavy bags specifically to toughen the bone and surrounding tissue over months, not days. Skip that conditioning, and even a technically perfect kick can end a fighter's night with a broken leg instead of a finish. Technique gets you the motion, conditioning is what lets you actually use it at full force. Myth 8. Chokes are safer than strikes, no real risk at all. Blood chokes like the rear naked choke cut off circulation through the carotid arteries and can render a fighter unconscious in under 10 seconds. And referees are trained to stop the match the instant that happens, which is genuinely fast compared to the cumulative damage of repeated strikes to the head. But researchers are still actively debating whether being choked unconscious carries its own long-term brain health risks, separate from strikes entirely, and that research hasn't settled the question yet. It's not accurate to call chokes risk-free just because they end fights quickly, and it's not accurate to say they're equivalent to getting knocked out by punches either. The honest answer is that this is a genuinely open scientific question, not a solved one. Myth 9. Power matters more than cardio. Highlight reels are full of first-round knockouts, which makes it easy to assume raw power decides most fights. Championship bouts run 5 5-minute rounds instead of 3, specifically because a fighter's gas tank becomes the deciding factor once the crowd-pleasing power shots stop landing clean. Fighters who look untouchable in round 1 have gone on to fade completely by round 4 once their conditioning runs out, handing the fight to someone with less raw power but more endurance. In a sport built on multiple rounds, cardio isn't a backup plan. It's often the actual game plan. Myth 10. Cutting weight is just extreme dieting. Nothing dangerous about it. Fighters dropping large amounts of body weight in the days before a fight are often just aggressively dehydrating themselves, not simply skipping meals. That level of rapid fluid loss has sent fighters to the hospital before events and pushed athletic commissions to introduce earlier weigh-ins, specifically to reduce how severely fighters cut in the final hours. It's presented on broadcasts as a routine part of fight week, but the routine itself carries real medical risk that most casual fans never see. The sport treats it as normal because it's common, not because it's safe. If you learned something today, subscribe and drop a comment with which MMA myth you want debunked next.